tax evasion, antivirus software, and poopy hammocks. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about John McAfee. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to my show, Mortality. It's the show where I drink tea with you and we just talk about something spooky. But I guess today the spooky thing is John McAfee. Now I know what you're thinking, John McAfee, how is he spooky? But just wait until the end, he's a piece of work. You've probably heard about him all over the news lately because of his recent death while in jail. He was in prison, right? Jail? I'm gonna say he was in prison. Before we start, I need to do a disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes, and viewer discretion is advised because this video will have content concerning murder, sexual assault, and other sexual situations. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, I'll pour the tea and we'll get started. Let's go. If you had a computer at any point in the 90s, it's likely that you had antivirus software from McAfee on it. John McAfee figured out how to make antivirus software in the late 80s, and he was really one of the first people to do it. Computers back then were so new, a lot of people didn't have them, didn't know how to use them, and most people didn't even know what a computer virus was, much less how to protect their computers from one. Like, you just learned how to use your new beige Dell desktop computer and now it's sick? Like, what does that even mean, right? So yeah, John was one of the first people who created antivirus software, and of course he sold it. He started a little business and he marketed it to people, he had investors, and it was immensely successful almost overnight. Eventually, his company was getting bigger and his investors wanted to make it more corporate. But John wasn't a very suit and tie corporate kind of person, and they knew that. He might have been a successful business owner, but he did not really have the capability to be very professional. So his investors bought him out of the company in 1994. And by the 2000s, he decided to retire completely. People noted that back during this quiet time in John's life, he was already an extremely paranoid man. He would always be thinking that someone was following him or that someone was going to harm him or his wife. And he was a successful man for sure, but there was really no reason for him to be thinking these things. A while after this, John moved out of the United States to an island in Belize called Ambergris Caye. Do you think it's called that because they have a lot of ambergris wash up on the beach? You know what ambergris is, right? It's like that really expensive whale stuff. Anyways, from what I understand, he started a pretty normal life in Belize. He wasn't doing anything weird or suspicious, it seemed, at this time. Maybe just some casual rich people tax evasion. I don't know about that for sure, don't take my word on that. While on the island, John was perceived as a very cordial, fun-loving, giving man. He had a lot of money, and he wanted to show people that he cared. But it seems like the only people he cared about were the police. He was giving them very large monetary donations, and then also giving them police batons, tasers, even $1 million boat. But he would never donate to schools or the poor. It was just the police. The vibe that a lot of people got from that was that he just really wanted the local police in his back pocket. Which is not confirmed, but I mean, yeah. So we mentioned earlier that John had a home on the island of Ambergris Caye in Belize. But then he also bought some land on the mainland of Belize in an area called Orange Walk. He used this land that he bought to build a compound, or at least that's how it was described by everyone. After chilling out on the island for a while and enjoying his retired life, he decided he got a little bit bored. John decided that he wanted to start a new business. Belize has very few laws concerning businesses and starting new businesses, so he knew that this would be an easy thing to do. So John has this compound built, and on this compound he also builds a laboratory. He wanted to start this new business we mentioned earlier by making and selling organic medicine. To do this, he hired a scientist from America for this job. I don't know if you would call this person a scientist or a lab technician, but she's a very smart person. Her name is Allison Adonisio, and she flew all the way from America to Belize to start this company with John. She had heard Belize was tropical, and she was still young, so she thought the experience would be fun and new. So Allison moves all the way to Belize, sets up in this little laboratory on the compound property, and she starts doing research for this new medical business. At one point while Allison is doing this research, John comes to her and says, "Hey, do you have anything that we can show investors so that they will give us their money so we can start this business?" But if you know anything about science, it's that usually it's a very cool thing, but not as impressive as you would think visually. Science in itself is extremely cool, but whenever you have samples in a lab, it's not as interesting as you would think it would be. Not everything is an elephant toothpaste experiment. Allison told him, well, no, we don't really have much to show people, because in reality, she kind of had just gotten there and she didn't really have the time to make anything impressive. John was a little put off by this. He was kind of oh, well, why not? We need something to show investors, we need their money. So he had Allison put food coloring into the bottles and vials in the lab with water so it looked cooler than it was. and then they took pictures with them to show to the investors. Allison did state that she was uncomfortable with this. She said it felt like they were lying, but John reassured her, saying that this was just how business was done, and so she let it go. I saw some of those pictures, and honestly, it looks extremely fake, so I don't really know what John was thinking with that one. I don't know if he really was able to fool anyone with that, but it wasn't convincing. So I stated before that even before he moved down to Belize, John was a very paranoid man. While in Orange Walk, John ended up hiring about 12 really tough-looking dudes with guns to be his bodyguards. A lot of these men were former criminals or they served time in prison, which in of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. You could have been in prison or a criminal and, you can be a different person now. But the concerning thing is that John was using these men to police the streets of Orange Walk. Orange Walk already had their own police force, but John had these men build their own police station in town, and then they would police the town and tell everyone that if they weren't in their homes by 9 p.m., they would be killed. So why did law enforcement in the town put up with this? Well, John had bribed some of them. A lot of them were on his side. So at this point, John can kind of do whatever he wants. He has a lot of money and a lot of power. He started talking about taking on the Belizean government, and he called his guards hitmen and said he could have anyone killed that he wanted, which is not a normal thing that people say. So this is where I'm going to put in a bit of a warning. In this next part, we will be talking about sexual assault. If that's not something you want to hear about, please feel free to jump ahead to this time and we'll meet up with you in a bit, okay? Eventually, the scientist that he hired, Allison, she said that she felt uncomfortable working for him and quite frankly that she was scared, like I think we all would be. John was becoming way too powerful in this small country and she knew that. Allison actually went and voiced her concerns to John, and she told him that she was sad because she missed her home and her family. She had been crying so much that she had a constant headache from it. She told John this, and then he went to go get her a glass of orange juice with some pills for her headache. Allison states now that the orange juice tasted bitter, but she didn't really realize what had happened until it was too late. John assaulted her that night, and the next morning she woke up and ran back to her apartment to stay there and recollect herself. And then she very bravely went back to John to ask him to buy her out of the company because she wanted to leave Belize on good terms. John responded to this by losing his mind. He threatened her life, and she ran out of his home to the laboratory building nearby where she locked herself inside. She said that she had a moment with herself where she realized that John was crazy and that he was going to hurt people, and so she started destroying all of the research and the medicine in the building because she didn't want him to use it for bad reasons. Allison uses this spare time that she has to try and write an email to her father to set up a trip for her to come home, but she said as soon as she hit that enter button, John cut the power to the building. It sounds honestly like a horror movie. He purposefully cut the power to trap her there. Allison said that she sat in the dark inside the laboratory while John was banging on the front door and the windows trying to get inside. At one point, he even leaves and comes back with a gun to once again threaten her life. After a while, John does leave, however, and she takes this time to call some friends that she had made in town. They take her to the airport the next morning and they fly her back to the United States and she returns safely home. I am still so stunned by her and I'm very happy that she's still alive. So yeah, John was a real piece of work. Needless to say. He had about 5 or 6 girlfriends while he was in Belize, and they were all aware of the situation, and they were all consenting adults, so I guess it's okay. I guess. The girls said he would do all kinds of things that were out of the ordinary, but the funniest, and honestly it's not related at all to his crimes, but I feel like it would be remiss of me not to mention it, he would have the girls sit in a hammock with a hole cut out of the middle, and then he would have them sit on this hole, and he would put his face under it, and he would have them poop on his face. Normally I wouldn't care, but because it's John McAfee, I do care. Hey guys, it's Editing Mayfield. I felt like this would be a good point in the video to throw in some of the stranger things John has said and done that I forgot to mention while filming. Most of us are aware of his weird whale tweet, which I will put up on the screen for you to pause and read here. He's tweeted racist comments, things that are harmful to women, big surprise there. He also has made various comments about relations with animals, both on Twitter and in interviews. I saw one Zoom interview where he got so mad at a question the interviewer asked him, John blurted out, "Have you ever a rabbit?" before abruptly leaving the Zoom call. I also saw that he lied about being arrested in Norway. He said that he was arrested for wearing a lace thong over his face as a face mask during the 2020 pandemic, but this wasn't true at all. I don't know why you would lie about that, but he did. He also tweeted that he was a pro at anal fisting, was like the king of recreational drug use, and that he had 47 genetic children. The list goes on. He said and did all of this, claiming that he loved messing with people and the media, but I have a suspicion that he just loved the attention. Anyways, back to the video. At one point, his compound in Orange Walk was actually raided by the GSU, which is the Gang Suppression Unit of Belize. He could get away with bribing the local police, but he could not get rid of the GSU. He had already been causing so much trouble for that area of Belize, and then they had heard he was actually trying to mass-produce narcotics. And this ended up being correct. They found something that was like methamphetamine, but it wasn't quite methamphetamine. It was like kind of halfway there. I kind of wonder if he tried making some kind of new form of meth, or if he just like didn't quite get the recipe right. I feel like making a new kind of meth would be very on brand for him, don't you think? Anyways, after he got his compound raided by the GSU, it mysteriously burned down. And he moved back into his home that he had purchased on the island of Ambergris Caye. So John always had 2 or 3 armed guards around him at all times, along with some aggressive dogs, and there were really no exceptions to this rule. He had them on the beach with him, at the bar with him, everywhere. One of John's neighbors, named Greg Fall, was very vocal about how much he disliked John's dogs because they were so aggressive. It doesn't sound like anyone really liked those dogs, to be honest, but it also sounds like Greg was the only one to have ever said anything about it. One evening, John was at home when he had been notified that his dogs had actually been poisoned. His guard had seen them outside in the yard, and they had been foaming at the mouth. One of his girlfriends said he was extremely distressed by this and that he ended up crying, which was something that she had never seen him do before. It's been speculated that in this moment, John believed immediately that Greg was the one who poisoned his dogs. A day after this, Greg went out with a friend to a bar for the evening, and then afterwards he walked home. After getting home, he called his friend a little while later, saying that he saw someone in his front yard and that it made him nervous. His friend offered to come over and see what was up, but Greg said, "Don't worry about it, I just wanted to let someone know what was happening." However, the next morning at 7 a.m., Greg's body was found by his housekeeper, and the news gets everywhere almost instantly. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing was stolen, and it seems like he was shot sitting down. It was also noted that he had taser marks all over his body. So initially, everyone already suspected John as the person who had murdered Greg. Nothing has ever been officially stated about this case, but in the 2016 documentary Gringo that was about John McAfee, it says that he likely paid a man named Eddie McCoy $5,000 to commit this murder. This is backed up in the documentary by John's personal accountant at the time and also one of his previous girlfriends. John went into hiding basically overnight, having his personal driver smuggle him out of Belize into Guatemala illegally. During his time in Guatemala, John would contact the media multiple times, and I did read a few of these statements, but they all just kind of sounded like, "I'm not on the run because I have to be. I'm on the run because I wanna be." Like, sure, John, okay. I watched a lot of interviews that John did during this period of time, and every time someone asks him, like, "Hey, did you kill Greg?" he always goes like, "No, I didn't kill him." Like, he's nodding his head as he says it. And I'm not a behavioral analyst, but everything I've learned from that guy on the Observe channel has told me that if someone's nodding while saying, "No, I didn't do it," that means they did it. He also just dodges a lot of questions, answers questions with questions, isn't very straightforward. Again, like, not confirmed, but also, like, I'm a detective now. I think he did it. So John is on the run, but Guatemalan authorities know he's in the country, and quite frankly, at this point, they're sick of him. They find him, arrest him, and then begin the process of deporting him back to Belize. So they're trying to deport John back to Belize because they want him to stand trial for murder. So I don't know all of the details, but apparently in Guatemala, how deportation works is that whenever you're in custody, if you're in custody over a certain number of hours, you have the opportunity to appeal that deportation. Apparently this appeal can allow you to stay in Guatemala for up to 15 years, and they're obviously trying to avoid this. They want him back in Belize. John's lawyer isn't sure that he can get the paperwork done fast enough to keep John in Guatemala, and so John stalls. John pretends to have multiple heart attacks, so they take him to the hospital multiple times, and this works. His lawyer meets that deadline, and John is able to stay in Guatemala. In the end, John ends up back in the United States. Now back in the United States, John decides to step into the world of politics. He ran to become the Libertarian candidate for the presidential election in 2016. With his platform being cybersecurity for the country. He didn't win, obviously, but he did come in second place. After some time, he eventually left the United States again because tax evasion. He said that he paid over $50 million in taxes over the years to the United States government and that he never received that amount back in services. So he reasoned that he shouldn't have to pay anything else to the government because of this. He didn't pay any taxes from 2014 to 2018. After years of tax evasion and bragging about how he was on the run for tax evasion on social media, he was eventually arrested in Spain back in October of 2020. He had been in prison for 9 months, and the United States wanted John McAfee back so he could be charged for all of his crimes. Personally speaking, I do think that John knew that this day would be coming. John has said on social media multiple times that if he was going to be murdered, it would be by a hanging. Which is like, how would you know something like that, right? On June 23rd of 2021, this is exactly what happened. John McAfee was found dead in his prison cell by hanging in an apparent suicide, only hours after he received the news that he was going to be extradited back to the United States. He was constantly talking about how one day he would be whacked or how he would be assassinated by someone he once spoke poorly of. He was a man who lived constantly looking over his shoulder. He always thought someone was going to harm him even back when no one would have ever considered it. There are a lot of conspiracies flying around right now about what happened to John and if he really killed himself in his prison cell, but honestly, I think that's exactly what he wanted. I think he would have loved to have been cool enough to be mysteriously murdered for whatever reason. He never once faced consequences for his actions, and I think he knew that once he was back in the United States, he wouldn't have to do that. And I don't think that was something he could personally deal with. Again, this is starting to be a lot of opinion-based statements, but it seems that in all of the interviews I watched of him, he was very quick to anger. He would oftentimes vaguely threaten whoever was interviewing him. They would ask really benign questions or funny questions, and he would not appreciate it at all. He had zero ability to read the room. He was the kind of person that always had to be in control, whether he was actually in control or not. He just had to feel like he was. And I think in death he managed to come up with a story that would control how his death would be perceived by others. I'm sorry I can't be more impartial in the final comments of this video, but I feel like I just learned too much about him to remain impartial. I think that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for making it to the end. I know I had a lot of opinions and feelings in this one, but I hope it's all the same to you. Please hit like and subscribe. I'm still just a new YouTuber, so I really appreciate it. I'll see you again next week. Okay, guys? Bye! Such a strange man.